right, folks. I am here with Damian Synadinos. I have to read his name every time that I say that because I have so much anxiety. I'll say it the wrong way, and it'll be Synadinos. I did that once years ago, and he corrected me. I've retained the anxiety from that moment. Damian and I have been friends for years. I first met him at a cast conference. It may have been 2011 or 2010. It was one of those. Maybe it was 2012. It was right around that area. It's been about 10 years, I think, that I've known Damian. Damian has a consultancy that he calls Ineffable Solutions. So I thought we'd start there. I was surprised to hear that your company is called Ineffable Solutions because I know what that word means. I'll quote from the OED. That cannot be expressed or described in language. Too great for words. Transcending expression. Unspeakable, unutterable, inexpressible. And that's the Damian Synadinos promise. So let's start there. You named your company very definitely, and this fits what you're trying to say. Help me understand.
Yeah, this was certainly, I put a lot of thought and effort into this name. And there was a lot of different criteria I thought about while trying to choose a name. One was, is the domain available? Silly things like that. And then, are there other companies that have this name? Does the name mean something to me? Is it personal? Does it have meaning and significance to me? I thought that was an important thing. Does the name have meaning and significance to others? And if not, what happens? If so, what happens? And so those are some of the things I tried to think about. And one of the original names I was going to call my company was areti, a Greek word that means virtue and excellence, striving for goodness and excellence in all things that you do. And I really liked that because I'm half Greek, and I thought it had meaning to me, and that's what I try and do, be virtuous. And but as I started to find out, there was a lot of other companies that had that name, areti Consulting, areti Solutions. There was one, areti Exterminators, which I thought was an odd choice, but there was dozens and dozens of companies that had areti as a name. So I kind of put that one aside, and I struggled with what other words mean something to me. And I kept running into roadblocks where the domain wasn't available, or it didn't mean much to me, or it was such a vague, odd word that it probably didn't mean much to other people. And as I kind of got meta and looked from the outside in, I realized, what's the word for not having a word to describe something? And that's when I came across ineffable. And I thought that was pretty cool, had a lot of meaning for me. It seemed uncommon, but not rare, if there's a distinction there, that it's not a common word that's used in daily conversation, but also it's not incredibly rare. Some people know what it means. And for those that don't, I typically get several different reactions when people hear the name of my company. They either know what it means, and they go, what a great name, I love it. Or they say, oh, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? And my business cards, and I have shirts, and I usually have a little cheat sheet that says too great for words, an asterisk, so they can look up the word right on the shirt or on the back of the business card. And then they can learn something just by learning the name of my company. They're better than they were before. And then there's the third type of person that goes, I don't know what that means. Hey, pass the coffee. And that tells me something about the person as well. But that kind of tells you the domain was available. It means something. It's a conversation starter, and it kind of describes me and what I'm trying to do, in that it's difficult to describe. Sometimes there's no words to describe it.
Well, I think it might have a level of meaning that you haven't said outright in your answer right here, but I want to try this out on you and see if you resonate with it.
Shoot.
I was recalling today, getting ready for this, how some years ago, I was watching the show True Detective with my son. And in that show, the first season of True Detective on HBO, in that show, there's a moral dilemma that crops up, and two of the characters are arguing about this moral dilemma, which involves prostitution, and was it good, or was it right or wrong for someone to help a certain person in a certain way. And it doesn't really matter what the substance of it was about. But my son and I stopped we were arguing about it a little bit while the thing was going on. So I stopped the video and we had a full discussion about this. And we didn't resolve the moral issue, except that it occurred to me while we were doing this that there can be no resolution of the issue, no matter what. There is no possible formula. It's like saying, what's the value of X? Let's settle this once and for all in mathematics. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to be settled because X represents a variable that can represent lots, an infinity, many infinities of different things. So you can frame it and look at it in a certain way and say, this is a good way to think about this. And from this point of view, what that person did was wrong. Or you could rotate the frame a little bit and say, well, from this point of view, the person was absolutely right. And so if you frame it this way, then this is what we would have to say. And it occurred to me that it's not the resolution, it's the struggle itself wherein lies morality. Morality lies in the struggle to know what is right, not in the memorization of solutions that are right. And that, I think, reflects a little bit of the word ineffable. We can't say what certain solutions are in an absolute sense because they do not exist in an absolute sense. So it's as if you specialize in solving problems that have no easy solution, no fixed solution, and that to solve them is a struggle. And I think that, to me, I just realized this morning, that's a good reason to use a word like ineffable solution. But am I right that is what you gravitate to, isn't it?
Yes, I like the way you put it. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it does resonate with me.
And I forgot you're half Greek, which also suddenly makes me realize that you are the person I know in my life most like Diogenes. And here you are. You actually might have been related to him. How many kids did he have? Probably not many. We got to get the mitochondrial DNA going here. So, struggle. I have been in many conversations with you where I use a word and you say, but what does that word really mean? And I go, well, here's what I mean by it. And by the time I answer you, you say, I just went to the dictionary and there's 17 meanings. So let's go through them. Could it be this? Could it be that? And we go through a certain struggle to consider the possible meanings, not just that I might have, but that other people might have with this. And this seems to be something that you have a lot of energy for, a lot of enthusiasm for. Can you talk to me about where that energy comes from? Why is it that you have so much interest in that sort of thing?
What that sort of thing in a better package? Interest in what exactly?
Worrying about definitions and semantics. You like to talk about semantics,
Uh-huh.
but semantics is something that people dismiss
Okay.
routinely
All
online.
right. I think I can draw this back. I got married 20 years ago or so, after 3 years of dating, and we were married for 10 months, then got divorced. Whoops. And so after the marriage counseling and introspection afterwards, and going into a cave and kind of putting myself under the microscope and figuring out what went wrong, because this was an awful, painful time and it really stuck. And I tried to figure out why. So during all of those things, I tried through the counseling and the introspection, I figured out that much of the divorce was due to miscommunication. It wasn't because of the dirty clothes or the laundry or the dishes or the other small things that we quibbled about. It turned out that we were not communicating with one another sufficiently, and we were talking past one another. And so I kind of realized that the miscommunication was a big, if not a major part of causing this divorce, and the divorce was painful. So communication caused pain. So I thought, boy, I need to be better at communication, because maybe if I'm a better communicator, if I ever get married again, I won't get divorced and I can avoid future pain. So I set about learning and teaching myself more about communication. And part of learning communication is all about semantics and linguistics and understanding meaning and asking why and saying, wait, James, what do you mean by that word? And let me look it up in the dictionary, so that we're not talking past one another, not having shallow agreements. And maybe I'll avoid a future divorce, which I married again, and so far so good. So it seems that all the things I've learned about semantics, linguistics, communication have helped me not get divorced, avoid that type of pain. And guess what? It helped me in a lot of other areas of my life as well, professionally, personally, all sorts of, with my friends, with my family, with my job. So I think that's where the origin story is. And why do I still have energy for it? Because I realized that so many bad things come from miscommunication. Looking back at my career and my life, so many things that went wrong. You dig down and you find out that, oh my gosh, it wasn't about this or this. Down here, it was about a miscommunication. And so I think that bad things can happen with miscommunication. Good things happen with effective communication. And I've learned that it's made me a better tester, a better husband, a better human. And I like to tell and teach other people the things that I've learned, so that other people will be better testers and spouses and human beings. And that fills me with meaning. Sometime after the divorce, my personal priority stack changed, where for a long time in my 20s, it was money, 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 and then other things after that. And money is certainly still important to me. But after that introspection and after the divorce, I kind of rearranged my priority stack of what things are important to me in life. And I realized that money was still important, but not that important as it was before. And what was more important was having meaning on this earth. I imagined myself on my deathbed and surrounded by my family and my friends. And with my last breath, I say, did I matter? And my family and friends say, you matter, Damian. And I say, well, you have to say that. You're my family and friends. Of course, you're going to tell me that. But did I matter other than that? And I didn't want to die thinking I didn't really matter. So I thought, well, what matters to me? What matters to me at this point is not making a lot of money. It's helping people be better than they were before. And so that is now the top of my stack. And so if I'm trying to help people be better than they were before, and I became better by becoming a better communicator, and part of that is semantics, linguistics, and meaning, then that's where I continue to get the energy to teach people about those things. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm sure you're on your deathbed. The people who truly love you will answer, depends what you mean by matter. And then
you got me.
And they'll say revenge. Yeah, that makes sense. So let me try a little of that. You just said communication is crucial. It's very important.
I think so.
It reminds me of when I used to run postmortems, which the kids like to call retrospectives, but I like to call postmortems because we slayed dragons in those days. Back in Berlin International, I would run a postmortem after each each release of Portland C++. And what we would do is get into little tables and get different mix of people around each table. We had 120 people on that project, so we had a big room of people in it. And every table would identify things that didn't go so well and things that went well. That is the typical stuff that people do at these. And they were quite helpful to us. But every single time on the list of top 5 things that didn't go very well, communication.
Bad coffee. Oh, no, communication. Yeah.
And it occurred to me that every time it came up, people meant a different thing by it because we kept doing it better. But it doesn't matter how well you do it. It's going to be in the top 5. You might as well just hard code it into as like the number 3 issue. It sometimes wins the Oscar, but it's always nominated.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the Tom Hanks of things that you identify at postmortems and retrospectives.
It's almost interesting that because it's so frequently in the top 3, top 5, it's almost lost any value or meaning that people say, yeah, communication, but what else? Let's focus on those things. It's almost like, yeah, we know it's important, but let's focus on this other stuff that we can actually do. We can't fix communication.
It's a Roman Colosseum. Like something happened at the Roman Colosseum that I didn't like. Well, what was it? Was it the thing with the lions and the Christians? Was it the spear thing? The gladiators? You didn't like the hot dogs? Like, what is it? What is it that went wrong? So communication. So here you said communication is important. And so I'm going to say, what do you mean by communication, Damian? When you say that communication is important, what can you possibly mean by that? An idea that comes into my head is you mean that there's an idea in somebody else's mind that's encoded somehow in their neurons, and they want to package that up in some form of a string of bits, which is encoded into sound waves or word bytes, and that gets sent as a signal through the ether and pops up in somebody else's mind. And a miscommunication is when the idea at the other end doesn't match, doesn't equal the idea at the near end. Is that what you're talking about when you say communication?
So close. A lot of the stuff you just said is what I would use in my answer and will use in my answer. So a simple way I talk about it is I have an idea in my head and I want to get it into your head as sufficiently, adequately. Anything on top of that is gravy and nice to have. You'll understand me better than you did before. But anything below sufficient or adequate, then there's danger, there's risk. And if we're talking about something not very important, then it's not very important. The risk is not that critical. But if we're talking about something that's really, really important, I need to at least get the thing that's in my head into your head sufficiently, hopefully even better than that. And so just like you said, I have this thing in my head. It's an idea. Now, if it's half baked in my own head and it's not completely thought through and I don't understand it myself, there's a problem. But if I really understand this concept and I want to try and get this idea over to you about the type of sneakers I like or a new way of testing software or something like that, I want to try and get it. So I think of a way to encode this idea. And like you said, out comes air and it hits your eardrums and your eardrums are moving in and out, but we're in a noisy stadium. So some of the words didn't get all the way to your ear. We're underwater or you have earmuffs on because it's cold outside. So maybe some of the message dropped out there because of the medium, but it finally hits your ears and they vibrate and it goes into your head and the synapses fire. And you don't know some of the words that I used because ineffable. What's that? What's that, Day? I never heard that word, but maybe by context, you can figure out what it might mean. or maybe the context isn't enough and you just don't know, but you're too scared to ask what it means. Or maybe you have a different idea. I know what it means, and it means something different than what I know that it means, what I think it means. And so that's dangerous because you don't ask. You say, I know what that word means, and it means something different to me. And I used the word fire, and I didn't realize that your house burnt down last week. So now fire is a very sensitive topic to you, and all these different things can happen where the idea that was in my head did not get sufficiently into your head. And that's miscommunication. And communication is if you can repeat back to me. I learned this, I think, from you many years ago. This was your stopping heuristic on how to stop an argument. But if I tell you an idea and I say, I'd like you to tell me the idea back, and you say it in different words, don't just repeat back the words I use. That's cheating. Use different words and repeat back my idea. And if you can do it such that I say, yeah, that's what I meant. That's sufficiently what I meant. Or that's exactly what I meant. Then I'll say, we have communicated. If you repeat it back and I say, you're close, but not quite, and it's not good enough. In this case, the close is not good enough. Then we have miscommunicated. Miscommunication has occurred. I need to try again or ask. We need to continue working so that the idea that was in my head is sufficiently adequately in yours.
Okay. And communication can be a struggle.
Totally. I'm sometimes say, it's almost miraculous to me that anyone can ever communicate with anyone else because of the nature of all the information that's packed into a single word. And all if I understand the word cat to mean this, and you understand the word cat to mean something else, and I use the cat in the middle of a sentence, and cats have paws, and paws have claws, and claws are sharp, and all those words have definitions. And if the word sharp means something to you, and there's all sorts of things that can go wrong. It's almost miraculous that we can talk about anything with anyone ever. Super tricky. And we use these clumsy things called words. Imagine if we could read each other's minds, how amazing that would be. I could just tap in. But what if you speak a different language than me? Or what if you use the word ineffable and I don't know what it means? Or what if you haven't, how does that exactly work? Just what if it's half baked in your head? Is it going to be half baked in mine as well? And maybe that's perfect. Even if you could dispose of these clumsy words and use this perfect method of communication, there's all sorts of problems that could still happen.
Well, here's a problem that crops up for me because I conceive of software testing very differently than most people conceive it, but I still use a lot of the same words, most of the same words. And what I mean by those words is quite similar to what most people mean, which is why I use the same words, but not exactly what most people mean.
So you have a namespace.
Yeah, well, I have a RST namespace. So within the RST namespace, we feel comfortable defining things the way we want to define them. And everything makes sense and is consistent within the RST namespace. But also we've designed it so that you can talk to people who don't know anything about RST and they'll pretty much understand you, but they might grievously misunderstand you at times. So for instance, for me, I say things like other people will say, well, I write test cases and I'll say, oh, okay, I don't really use test cases in my work. And for some people, that's like saying I don't test. You don't write test cases. Well, how do you find bugs? Well, you could find bugs without test cases. In fact, you don't need test cases at all to find bugs. The test case is a complete invention that somebody came up with in 1972 or something, probably more like 68. And then it just stuck. And then a lot of people just copied that way of talking. But no, I find bugs by testing. Well, isn't that the same thing as running test cases? Aren't those synonymous? Like, no, they're not. I'm not running test cases when I test any more than you're running marriage cases when you are interacting with your spouse. Do you think of yourself as writing marriage cases when you or I really I want to get my life going. I need to get out and see people. I better start writing some dating cases and storing them in a dating case management system so that I can make progress in my life and find my soulmate. Nobody thinks that way because it's a dumb way to think. Totally unnecessary. So this idea of a test case is a sort of an atomization of testing. It's a reification of testing. And that's a word that Michael Bolton and I use a lot, reification, which means to take something that's a relationship, something that's contingent, something that's ephemeral and variable, and cast it in stone. And take one example of that and say that one example is the thing. Mm-hmm. And that's the fallacy of reification.
That's kind of why I don't provide examples in my children's book to improv. I wrote the kids' book about improvisation, but I purposefully did not provide examples of a princess and a fairy and a dragon and an astronaut and a cowboy, that you can be any of those things, and you can be on a desert planet, or you can be in the bottom of the ocean. And I didn't do those because then you'd say, all right, kids, it's time to do some improv. And they'd say, I'm going to be a dragon in the bottom of the ocean, or I'm going to be an astronaut on the planet. They can't think outside of those concrete examples that you've given. So I don't give any, forcing them to use their imagination.
So your book has no examples in it?
None.
So I'm trying to imagine what your book says. Let's do improv, kids. Okay. They walk into a room. Sometime later, they come out. That was fun. Whoa, what happened in that room behind closed doors? I only wish I could show you.
There's plenty of explanation and description of what to do and how to do it, but there's no concrete examples. So it doesn't get reified. This abstract idea does not become reified in their minds.
Yes. And I'm sure also, I wish I had something to add to that. You taught me about yes and a long time ago, and that's stuck in my head ever since. Anyway, yeah, improv is one of your skill sets. It is a sort of a skill set. There's a whole lot of skills that go into improv, and that's something that you studied and done. And one of your talks is on improv, isn't it?
Actually, it's called applied improv in the biz. I use improvisational principles and apply them to different contexts, applied improv. So I apply the principles and tenets and rules, air quote rules of improv to communication, and I apply them to testing, and I apply them to requirement elicitation and analysis, and I apply them to being a better person. So, but those rules themselves, the improv rules and principles, are just fundamental concepts wrapped up in a prettier wrapper.
Okay. So we were talking about communication, and I want to apply it to testing. And I have a problem in communicating testing because I have my internally consistent testing terms and definitions, the namespace. And it's a mental model of software testing. And I've tried to design it so that if people don't understand it, at least that will be a graceful failure. They will misunderstand it in ways that aren't catastrophically wrong.
Explain that. Like how so?
Well, for instance,
explain and demonstrate.
For instance, I deny the possibility of automated testing. There's no automated testing. People like to say automated testing. I think that no, that's not true, because testing is not an algorithmic process, but automation is always algorithmic. And so what you can automate is not testing. What you can automate is something else. It's output checking. Now you can automate things other than output checking, but what people mostly call test automation is supplying instructions to a system, the system operates, and then it produces an output, and then you check that output. That's what they mean when they say automated test. So I'm trying to promote testing as this highly skilled humanistic activity, and that project is dragged under the earth by evil zombies when I use terms like test automation, because in that very term I'm saying it's not human. And so when I realized that using the term test automation was working against my ideological project to elevate testing as a humanistic, highly skilled activity, I stopped using that term. And we tried for a while a different approach, which was in the early 2000s. For a while, my community was talking about what we called sapient testing. And sapient testing meant testing that required a human to do it. And the problem with that, and there's a nice little semantics lesson, right? The problem with that is that works, except that when people want to talk about non-sapient testing, they want that to mean stupid testing. That testing is so non-sapient. That's unsapient testing, blah. But that's not what unsapient testing just means. Testing that's perfectly good. It just doesn't require a human to do it. So as soon as I realized that the opposite of sapient testing was being misunderstood, I realized I couldn't fix that. So I abandoned the notion of sapient testing and I looked for another way. And that's when around 2008, Michael Bolton came up with this idea of checking versus testing. And we've been using that ever since. So here's how I'm backwards compatible. When I'm talking to people who are uninitiated and they use the term test automation, I just don't use that term. I will just say automated checking. I'll say those are checks. They'll say those are tests. I say, so when you run those checks, what happens? And because they also know what a check is just in terms of English, they automatically know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those things that they call tests. And I'm just using a different word for it. And somebody might stop me and go, why do you keep calling these checks? But I honestly can't think of a single example where anyone has ever interrupted the conversation and said, I don't know what you're talking about with checks. Why do you keep saying checks? They just act as if they know what I'm talking about. And I think they do know what I'm talking about.
That's the failing gracefully.
I say the word, that's what I mean by fail gracefully, in the sense that they might think I don't have a particular different definition of check or test, that I'm just talking about exactly the thing that they mean. I'm not really talking about what they mean, because I'm taught when I say the word check, I mean only the algorithmic aspect of that and not the human part where you design it or look at the results and evaluate the results, because that's not a check, that's a test.
Mm-hmm.
A check becomes a test when it has a wrapper of human judgment around it. And that can be a struggle to think and talk that way. But for my mental hygiene purposes, for the purposes of professional discipline, that is how I think, even though even I struggle sometimes to navigate these semantics. I feel like, but I should. And so I do. Because how can I ask other people to take testing seriously if I don't take testing seriously myself? It might be that there's somebody out there that's more professional at testing than I am, but I have to consider myself to be the high watermark, in that I can't expect anyone to be more careful about how they speak about testing than I am, if I fancy myself a testing expert, which I
So
do. I am a
here's a
testing
here's a
expert.
story I tell in some of my classes, that I was out with my daughter on a daddy-daughter date, and she was talking to me. We're chit-chatting about nonsense, and then she said that Stella is her best friend and Avery is her best friend. She said, "Daddy, Stella's my best friend and Avery's my best friend." And of course, there can only be one best, like unique. And so I thought, well, she can't have two bests. It's impossible. But instead of just laugh at her because she's a child and she doesn't understand, I said, "What do you mean?" They're linguistic, asking for a semantic conversation, and what do you mean by that? She said, best, like they're both my really good friends. I went, oh, so in her brain, the word best was a synonym for really good. And that's all she was trying to express. Not one's higher than the other. Maybe there is, but in that particular conversation, she was just using the word best to mean really good. Now, that didn't mean, when I was talking about the sandwich that we ate at McDonald's, I said, "This is the best sandwich." I said, "This is a really good sandwich," because I didn't want to use her language, even though I understood by my semantic question what she meant when she said best. No, maybe next time she says best, I need to ask again, because, maybe she's talking about television shows and I need to understand which one she likes over another. So I have to, maybe that time she does mean that one's favored over another. But I did not use the same language with her, with this child. I used the correct language, and that maybe it sticks. It's kind of, your story reminded me of that story.
Well, that's how kids learn language, not through being argued with, but just being around people using language in a certain way, and then they will pick it up.
Well, my story involves a child, and yours does in a way.
Well, I'm reminded of my own son.
But your
And
checking story and test automation involves a child as well. Maybe a child that should know better because of their physical age, but the language was childlike.
child in a sense, right? So here's another fact about the way I think about testing. When I say the word test, I always mean an event that has taken place or will take place in time and space. So I'm never referring to a document. But most people, when they say the word test, they are referring to a document or an idea, something that's been encoded, a script somewhere, and they'll call that a test. That is a test procedure or a test script. And the pattern that I'm using is the same thing in theater as a difference between a script for a play and a play.
I was going to talk about the difference between an improv scene and doing improv. Improv is a performance, something that happens and takes place at a certain time. And I bring to light that exact that comparison, that testing and improv are both things that you do, they're performances that occur. And there can be an improv performance or an improv scene, and there can be an instance or a test case, a case of testing or an instance of testing.
Yeah.
But that does not equate them.
Right. And so there's an implication of what I just said, which is it's not possible to do the same test twice, which also surprises people. But I cannot do the same test twice. I can do
into a river.
Similar test. I can run the same test procedure. I can do a similar test. I can try to do the same test twice in various ways to try to eliminate differences between one test and another test. But I remind myself that I cannot ever expect that when I perform a test today, that it is the same in every important way as it was yesterday. It might be. I might have managed to reproduce every important variable, but if it's truly a test, there's uncertainty involved. And part of the uncertainty may be lying in something that I didn't reproduce that I should have. Like, for instance, it might turn out that running a test at 3 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. was a meaningful difference, and you will see a failure that you wouldn't see otherwise. You just don't know. You don't realize that. So you have
Who said you can't step in the same river twice?
Heraclitus said that.
I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
That is to say, I'm told that Heraclitus said that. I don't think any of his actual writings survive, but Heraclitus is one of the most ancient of all known named philosophers. And here he is, another Greek, talking about ineffability.
And talking about the inability to run the same test twice.
Yeah, right. Right. Those Greeks, they thought of everything. So they also thought of atomism, and a lot of people want to atomize testing, which I reject.
Is that ADAM or ATOM?
ATOM.
Okay, I don't know it.
Atomized. So I have this network of how I talk about testing. It's self-consistent. It's a work in progress. Michael and I keep working out little kinks in it. And once in a while, it turns out he's been using a different definition than I have for certain things. We found out yesterday or the day before that he's been using a different definition of boundary in boundary testing than I've been using. So we're working through that, deciding what our official definition is going to be. But our position is that this is what it means to be a testing professional, is that you struggle with these ways of talking and you try to create a hygienic and effective mental model of software testing. And then you try to put that into words so that you can share it, so that we can communicate better about testing. And a problem with that is a lot of the people who want to communicate with about testing don't want to go through the process of this struggle. That's why we have to choose words and concepts that have a relatively graceful failure mode when they're misunderstood. That they won't.
That's why some of the things and topics I focus on are to help people realize why this struggle that you say some people don't want to go through the struggle. I help them realize why that struggle is so darn important. And they walk out of that room going, right, I wasn't interested in semantics before, but now I understand why it's so darn important. And next time that somebody is having a semantic conversation, I'll recognize it and I'll realize the importance of it.
Right. And that's what I want to wrap up this session in talking about. There's a principle that I use in my teaching, which sounds like something Confucius said, which is build the fire before boiling the kettle. And the idea here is I'm not going to pour cold water all over somebody and by criticizing what they're doing or saying until I've got a real hot fire and I've got them really interested and invested in the subject. So we got to get them interested and invested first. Sometimes in my teaching, I'll start with cold water, and I do that when someone is overconfident, when someone needs to be cooled down a little bit in order for us to get some good work done. Then I'll give them an exercise that's too hard for them to convince them that they have something to learn, bring them down to earth a little bit. But usually I'm dealing with people who are not confident in themselves, and they come to me in a kind of a broken state, either a broken state or a nascent state where they're a little seed that hasn't really germinated yet. And I'm just trying to breathe life into this. So I got to build the fire. And then, and later on, get into the critique and start holding them to a higher standard once they feel like I could be held to a higher standard. I'm good at this. Now, you told me something the other day that I thought was a little strange, and I want to bring it up. You said that somebody saw a talk you gave, the Words Matter talk. The word smatter. Is that what it is? Word
so clever. A smattering of words.
Smattering of words. But if you say it fast, it sounds like words adder. I don't know why you think that's significant. Anyway, so the Words Matter talk. And you said that somebody was really helped by that talk, and they told you that they had taken a suggestion that you made and they used it and it was successful for them. What was the suggestion? I asked. And you said that you had offered in that talk that if you don't know what somebody means by a term, you should ask them. And apparently this guy, that really made the light bulb go on for him. And I'm wondering, like, how could you possibly not already know that, man? Of course you ask.
It's possible he knew. It's possible he didn't know. Unlikely, but possible he did not even consider that was an option. More likely that he knew but was scared. And I gave him confidence. Or maybe that's where you're going with this, but
that's where I'm going with this. Where I'm going with this is there's a second order kind of help that you can give to somebody with the way that you talk about communication, which is, and I'm bringing this back, I'm going to call back to what I said before, that just by presenting this whole topic area as a struggle, like, hey, this is hard, folks. It's not hard because we're stupid. It's hard because this is amongst the most difficult kinds of things that humans ever attempt to do. And yet one of the most important things that humans ever attempt to do, because our ability to coordinate our actions in society peacefully instead of through violent, bloody conflict depend on our ability to communicate, amongst other things. But communication is certainly one of the pillars that of civilization itself.
Well, that's my building the fire. At the beginning of these talks, I spent plenty of time building the fire and explaining why communication is so important, including the reason you just gave. Anyway.
So I think what may have happened is the action of your presentation may have helped normalize in this fella's mind that of course there's you don't necessarily know what somebody means just by internally calculating on it. You may need to just directly ask them, and that is normal, and that's okay. And that may be a big part of how you help people and how you might help organizations, is to come in with your talking about semantics so that you get people into a better mood and a better acceptance of the kind of struggles that are always going on around us, but which might be considered shameful or private. Maybe we can externalize these a little more and cooperate with each other and empathize with each other as we struggle to communicate better and thus cooperate better with each other in the course of our enterprises. Does that sound right?
Perfect. Yes, very much.
So you think that you maybe communicated to me, and
do I need to repeat it back to your satisfaction?
Another callback. It's all wrapped up in a donut here. All right. It's been 55 minutes. That's a nice time for us to call it quits. Thanks for your help, Damian.
Thank you for the chat.